The construction cranes above Midland, Texas, have stopped moving. Not because of wind, not because of a strike, not because of a holiday. They have stopped moving because the men and women who operated them drove north across the Montana border 3 days ago. The pipeline project below those cranes is 7 months behind schedule. The American welders who stayed are working double shifts, and the project manager, a 30-year veteran of the energy industry, said something this morning that no American project manager has ever said on the record before. He said, "We cannot finish this job. Not late, not over budget. We cannot finish it at all. The people who knew how to do the critical welds are gone, and there is nobody left in this country who can do what they did." That is the sound of a $400 million mistake. And it began with a single sentence spoken into a bank of cameras in Houston. The setting was a press conference following a meeting with American energy executives. A reporter asked the president about the bilateral skilled labor agreements that allow Canadian tradespeople to work on American industrial projects, agreements that have been in place for decades, and that American construction and energy companies rely on to staff mega projects. The domestic workforce is too small to handle. The president's response veered off script almost immediately. He said, "Canadian workers, look, I hear a lot about Canadian workers. They come down here, they work on our projects, and frankly, they're overrated. Very overrated. We have the best workers in the world, right here in America. The best. Canadian workers are fine. They're okay, but we don't need them. We really don't. They should be grateful to work on American projects. They should be grateful we let them in. And honestly, they're replaceable. Every single one of them is replaceable with an American worker who would do the job just as well, maybe better, for less money." He went further. "Canada keeps acting like they're doing us a favor by sending workers down here. They're not doing us a favor. We're doing them a favor. We're giving their people jobs, good jobs on American soil. And if Prime Minister Carney wants to play games with that arrangement, fine. We'll replace them by Tuesday." The language was revealing on every level. Overrated, grateful, replaceable. These were not policy terms. These were dismissals. They were the words of someone who has never stood on a frozen pipeline right-of-way in February, never watched a certified welder join high-pressure pipe in a driving rain, never needed a crane operator to set a 40-ton steel column within a quarter inch of tolerance while working 200 feet above a city street. And within 3 hours, the response came. Not 3 days, not 3 weeks, 3 hours. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney did not hold a press conference to express disappointment. He did not issue a diplomatic protest. He activated a response that had clearly been prepared for exactly this moment. First, the Canadian Department of Labor issued an immediate advisory to all Canadian skilled tradespeople working on American projects, recommending that they return to Canada within 30 days. The language cited the hostile and disrespectful environment created by the president's statements about Canadian workers. Second, Carney announced the immediate suspension of bilateral skilled labor mobility agreements. Third, he announced expedited work permit processing for Canadian tradespeople seeking employment on projects in Canada, the European Union, the United Kingdom, Australia, and the Gulf states. Fourth, and most consequentially, he announced a new retention bonus, $20,000 for any Canadian tradesperson who returned from American projects and committed to Canadian domestic work for 2 years, funded entirely from tariff revenue collected on American imports. The message was surgical. If you do not want Canadian workers, the rest of the world does, and Canada will pay them to come home. Carney's statement that evening was different in tone from anything he had said in nearly 2 years of trade confrontations. He said Canadian workers are not overrated. They are not replaceable. They are not grateful for the privilege of building someone else's country. They are the best trained, most certified, most professional skilled tradespeople in the world. And they deserve to work in environments where their skill is respected, their contribution is valued, and their dignity is intact. If the President of the United States believes that Canadian welders, pipe fitters, iron workers, and electricians are replaceable, we respectfully invite him to replace them. Within 72 hours, the replacement test began, and it failed. In Midland, Texas, a pipeline project lost 14 certified welders from a single crew. These were not general laborers. These were journeymen with certifications in specialized welding processes that fewer than 500 people in North America are qualified to perform. The American welders remaining on site told their project manager that the critical welds on the remaining sections could not be completed without the Canadian crew because the required certification was not held by anyone else on the site. The project manager called 3 other pipeline contractors in the region. Every one of them told him the same thing. They had no available welders with that certification. They had not had any available for 2 years. In Pennsylvania, a nuclear reactor maintenance shutdown was postponed indefinitely. The team of Canadian specialists who performed the complex maintenance on reactor vessel internals had been recalled to Canada. The utility's chief operating officer informed federal regulators that the postponement would last an estimated 4 to 6 months while the company attempted to locate and qualify alternative personnel. The cost of the postponement, including replacement power purchases and extended operational modifications, was estimated at $75 million. For one facility, for one team, in Manhattan, an ironworker crew of 11 Canadians who had worked together as a unit for 8 years walked off a high-rise project on a Wednesday morning. The site superintendent, an American with 25 years in New York construction, told reporters he stood in the construction elevator after they told him and stared at the floor for 5 minutes. That crew set structural steel faster than any crew he had ever managed. Their safety record was perfect. They communicated without talking, anticipating each other's moves through years of shared experience. The superintendent had tried for 3 years to find an American crew with the same efficiency. He never found one. He told a local news affiliate, "You don't replace 8 years of teamwork in a job posting. That takes a decade to build, and it's gone because someone who has never climbed a steel column called them replaceable." In Louisiana, an LNG terminal expansion that was 7 months from completion stopped cold. The Canadian crane operators and pipe fitting crews that had been on site for 2 years packed their tools and drove north. The project's completion date is now listed as unknown. The estimated cost overrun, according to company documents filed with state regulators, is $400 million. The numbers spread quickly, and they told a story that no amount of political messaging could obscure. America is currently short an estimated 650,000 skilled construction workers. The average age of a certified welder in the United States is 55. Apprenticeship enrollment in the construction trades has declined 31% over the past 2 decades. For every 5 skilled tradespeople who retire in America, only 3 enter the field to replace them. This is not a temporary fluctuation. This is a structural collapse, and it has been building for 40 years, ever since American educational policy began systematically pushing young people away from skilled trades and toward 4-year college degrees, telling an entire generation that working with your hands was somehow lesser than working at a desk. The Canadian workers who filled that gap were not taking American jobs. They were doing work that American companies could not find American workers to perform. They held Red Seal certifications, Canada's national standard for trade qualification, which requires between 6,000 and 10,000 hours of supervised on-the-job training, combined with technical classroom instruction before certification is granted. Canadian welding certifications in pressure vessel and pipeline applications require testing protocols that exceed American Welding Society standards in several critical categories. These are among the most highly trained skilled tradespeople in the Western Hemisphere, and American companies recruited them actively, deliberately, and at significant cost, precisely because the domestic supply of those skills does not exist. Then came the human stories. Not the spreadsheets, not the policy analyses, not the trade deficit calculations. The human stories broke through everything else. A welder in Texas named Mark had spent 12 years building American pipelines. He had arrived as a 26-year-old journeyman with a duffel bag and a welding hood. Over those 12 years, he had trained 14 American apprentice welders. He owned a truck he bought in Odessa. He went to a Baptist church with his American girlfriend's family on Sundays. He coached a youth baseball team. His foreman, an American, a Texan, a man who had worked oilfield construction for 30 years, called Mark the best welder he had ever supervised. When the advisory came, Mark spent 2 days deciding what to do. He didn't want to leave. Texas was home. But his mother called from Quebec after seeing the press conference clip. His union representative told him Canadian companies in Alberta were offering immediate placement. His foreman called him, voice-breaking, and said, "I don't want you to go. Nobody here wants you to go, but I understand." Mark told a Canadian broadcaster, "He called me replaceable. I've been here 12 years. I train the guys who are going to have to finish this pipeline without me. I coach their kids' baseball team." And the President of the United States went on television and said I should be grateful, and I'm replaceable. I'm not angry. I'm hurt. There's a difference. Angry, I'd stay and fight. Hurt, I go home, and I'm going home. He can replace me. Let him try. In New York, an ironworker foreman named Jean had been in the city for 6 years. He had an apartment in Queens. He ate lunch at the same deli on Lexington Avenue every workday. The deli owner, a Greek immigrant who had been in New York for 30 years, taped a sign to the window on the day Jean told him he was leaving. It read, "We'll miss our Canadian boys. They's not replaceable to us." Jean told the New York Times, "I love this city. I love the skyline. Every time I look up and see steel I put there, I feel proud. But pride has a limit. I won't work where the man in charge of the country I'm working in goes on television and says I should be grateful. I'm not grateful. I'm skilled. There's a difference. Grateful is what you feel when someone gives you something you didn't earn. I earned every inch of every beam I've ever set. The political fractures that followed hit the White House from a direction no one expected. From the trades, from the construction industry, from the energy sector, from the working class base that the administration had built its entire political identity around defending. 3 American trade unions, the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers, the United Association of Plumbers and Pipefitters, and the International Association of Bridge, Structural, Ornamental, and Reinforcing Iron Workers, issued a joint statement that broke new ground in labor politics. American unions publicly defending Canadian workers and condemning an American president's remarks about the trades. The statement read, "Skilled tradespeople, regardless of nationality, deserve respect for their training, their certification, and their contribution to the projects they build." The remarks made by the President of the United States were an insult not only to Canadian workers but to the trades themselves. When the President calls skilled workers replaceable, he diminishes every welder, every pipe fitter, every iron worker in America and Canada alike. Skill is not defined by a passport. Craftsmanship does not recognize borders. These were unions whose members had overwhelmingly supported the administration in the previous election cycle. These were workers who had stood at rallies and cheered trade policies they believed would protect American jobs. They were now publicly breaking with the president, not because of a trade policy or a tariff, but because he had attacked working people. He had attacked their people. Governors of 6 states with major construction and energy projects wrote to the White House demanding immediate restoration of the bilateral labor agreements. One governor, a Republican who had supported the president in every previous confrontation, said publicly, "My state has $12 billion in active energy projects that depend on Canadian skilled labor. The president's remarks have jeopardized every one of them. I need those workers back. My state needs those workers back. And calling them replaceable doesn't make it true. It makes us look foolish." The cost estimates have continued to climb. A construction industry association now projects that the total cost of the Canadian worker departure across all affected sectors will exceed $8 billion within the first year if the bilateral labor agreements are not restored. $8 billion because a president went on television and called skilled workers overrated. But beyond the direct costs, beyond the project delays and the wage premiums, something deeper has happened. The insult made these workers visible. Before the president spoke, most Americans had no idea that tens of thousands of Canadian tradespeople were embedded in the American industrial workforce. They went to work, they did their jobs, they went home, and nobody outside the construction and energy industries knew or cared. The insult changed that. Every stalled project became a proof point. Every cost overrun became an invoice for the insult. Every delayed timeline became a measurement of exactly how replaceable these workers were, which is to say, not at all. The president said he could replace them by Tuesday.